Ladies and gentlemen, the end of the year fast draws upon us, and that means that there is only one thing that we must do. Compile lists of everything that has happened this year. And I am no exception to this list-making trend, so here are my top 10 games of 2022. Bear in mind just before we start that this list includes games that I have newly played in 2022. That means that I can't just use Ocarina of Time as the best game ever every single year, but it does mean that if I did play an old game this year for the first time, it's allowed on the list. But with the introduction and rulesy section done, let's get to the first item on our list. Number 10. Pokemon Scarlet, Game Freak, 2022. Pokemon Scarlet is a bizarre mess of a game in many ways. The technical issues with the game have been shown by a lot of people, and they aren't understated in any way. They are about as bad as people say. Now, some can look past all of those issues, and to an extent I was able to have fun with the game, but they do really diminish what I think is actually quite a solid Pokemon game in a lot of ways. Most remarkable about Pokemon Scarlet is the open world. Now, I actually don't think that the open world does very much to help the game, really. There's still a relatively rigid order in which you're meant to visit all the gyms, and therefore a relatively rigid order in which you're meant to deal with all the routes. And as such, it still feels like a relatively linear game, despite the fact that you can walk around anywhere. I think that the open world concept was done better by Legends Arceus, which we'll get to a little bit later on this list. But I do think it enhances the game somewhat, in that it's just easier to move around, and you have fewer random battles to deal with effectively. Where I think Scarlet shines is its story, which I think is probably the most effective that a Pokemon story has been in a very, very long time. The finale is absolutely spectacular, and whilst the mid-game and early game aren't all that, I think just the sheer spectacle of the end is enough to elevate Scarlet from a Pokemon game that I just would have forgotten about to one that will really stick in my memory for a long time. There are other flaws. I think that the new feature, terrestrializing, is simply a pursuit of the lightning in a bottle that was Mega Evolution that they've never really managed to capture again. But if you can see past the technical issues, I think you'll find one of the most unique Pokemon entries in a long time. Number 9. Pokemon Legends Arceus, Game Freak, 2022. That last line about the most unique Pokemon entry in a long time probably isn't quite as true as I would like it to be. Pokemon Legends Arceus, aka the prototype for Scarlet and Violet, is a game that I find to be fundamentally a lot better than its descendants. The game runs significantly better, the open world is a lot easier to explore. The Pokemon feel more interesting and captivating because there's more to do with them in the wild. But I think what really sticks out for me with Arceus is that this is a game that removed the core aspect of Pokemon that I like the most. Competitive battling, fighting gym battles, all of that stuff is just not there in that game. And yet it is still a game I found incredibly fun to play. And that is because I think it got the core loop of what it wanted to do. Capture as many Pokemon as you can, just don't worry about it. And it refined it, not to a mirror shine, but far enough that it was able to suck me in to a part of Pokemon that has never really interested me, which is capturing absolutely everything. But I think the real highlight of this game is actually the battle system. It's a very different system from what we're used to, with speed tierings not being quite the same as we expect them to be, and damage being far higher than in the mainline games. But the result speaks for itself. This is the only Pokemon game in nearly 20 years that genuinely challenged me, where even with full-on item shenanigans using everything I had available to me, the final boss came within 2 or 3 HP of killing me outright. So this game ends up standing above Scarlet and Violet purely because I really love a challenge, and this game provided that for me. Number 8. Crisis Core, Final Fantasy VII Reunion, Square Enix, 2022. I actually delayed this list because I knew Crisis Core was coming out, and therefore I didn't want to record positions or even thoughts on the list until I had played it. The crunch I'm facing now means that I'm weighing that decision, but I did really enjoy playing Crisis Core. It is a very strange game in a lot of ways. The remake is basically a pure remaster of the PSP version. There are almost no differences between it and the original. I went in expecting some chicanery the way that we saw in Final Fantasy VII Remake, but what I got was a PSP game on my computer. And it shows, with huge amounts of the game stuck inside missions which you just access from a save point, it seems, which would make sense for a mobile game which you expect people to play on the train, but less so for a PC game released in 2022. That said, the combat really stands up. There's a huge deal of crunch to it, every attack feels like it really lands, there's a lot of complexity to what you can do with materia, but I think more importantly than all of that, there's a real element of skill that you can display with this game. I, completely blind, was able to play through like 90% of the game on hard, until eventually the numbers caught up to me through pure finesse, which I really, really admire. And that's not to say anything about the story, which I didn't know about, I've never experienced before, and I found to be really compelling, if a little confusing sometimes. It's a game that's really helped by the emotional gravitas of its ending, and it made me really happy to have finally experienced Zack's story. So if you are up for some light holiday action, then I would really suggest picking it up. Number 7. Castlevania Aria of Sorrow, Konami, 2003. The first in our games from outside of 2022. Castlevania Aria of Sorrow is, I think, possibly one of the best Metroidvania games I've played in a long time. Having played through a fair bit of Metroid and a fair bit of Castlevania by this point, I think that I favour the gothic style of Castlevania over the futuristic setting of Metroid. And I think that I prefer the movement in Castlevania over the movement in Metroid as well. Aria of Sorrow was a joy to play from top to bottom, arena notwithstanding, with Dracula's incredibly stylish castle making a welcome return to my life, and the addition of Soma Cruz, a really great protagonist for the game and a really exciting addition to Castlevania. The Soul Collection system kept me wanting more, add in some really challenging and fun boss fights, and you have a really worthy accompaniment to Symphony of the Night. It certainly makes me excited for more Castlevania in the future, and I hope that I get to share it with all of you guys on this channel. Number 6. Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak, Capcom, 2022. Monster Hunter Rise manages to insert itself on my Game of the Year list again, with what I think was a really good expansion to the game in Sunbreak. With the light bow gun, I've found my groove in Monster Hunter, and I am happy pointing a gun at a monster and shooting it in its dumb face until it dies. So Sunbreak is essentially more of the same for me. Some of the light bow gun nerfs were a little bit disappointing, but they didn't really affect my enjoyment. We just had bigger monsters, different environments, and things were genuinely a little bit more challenging this time around as a result. And I think that was the right step for the game. I enjoyed having to concentrate a little bit more, to have to think a little bit more about my loadout every single time I went out to fight a monster. I do ultimately think that Sunbreak is a little bit weaker than base Rise, perhaps because I've just played so much of it. This time, once I beat the final boss, I didn't then go on to raise my HR to fight even stronger monsters beyond that, which might simply mean that Rise is finally at the end of its leash with me. But even if that's the case, I'm excited to see where the next Monster Hunter game goes, and I will assuredly pick it up when it does. Number 5. Xenoblade Chronicles 3, Monolith Soft, 2022. Xenoblade 3 represents Monolith Soft at their absolute best. That is to say that the game has an amazing plot that I think is filled with twists and turns that I didn't see coming. It has a main party that I absolutely loved, with the members being likable as individuals, but far, far better as a team. This is amplified by an amazingly diverse supporting cast, filled with characters that, again, I just fell in love with. Ashira, the insane soldier lusting after her own death, will be a character that I remember for the rest of my life. And all of this is supported by a really engaging gameplay system and absolutely excellent music. But it's not a pure monolith soft game without a lot of jank. And Xenoblade 3 has system upon system upon system, to the point that almost all of them make no sense. Chain attacks within the game effectively make everything else completely worthless. And my god, the inventory systems are just impossible to deal with. But it is a game where the core is so good that you fight through all of these things and come out with a smile at the end. I don't think it quite reaches the high of Torna, which was the DLC for Xenoblade 2, but it definitely comes close. So if you're looking for a long, interesting RPG, then this will be something that you want to check out. Number 4. Fire Emblem Warriors 3 Hopes. Intelligent Systems 2022. I love me some mindless hack and slash games. I was a huge fan of Hyrule Warriors when it released back in the day, and I was really pleasantly surprised by how good Fire Emblem 3 Hopes was. The gameplay is simplistic, but ultimately it's fun. It's really satisfying to pull combos off. It's amazing to see thousands of enemies fly away at the push of a button. And there's a little depth in the tactics as well. If you want to get S ranks on all the missions, then deploying your allies in a way that makes sense will do a lot of good for you. But to me, where 3 Hopes absolutely shines is its exploration of the world of Fodlan again. Frequent viewers of the channel will know that I absolutely adore Fire Emblem Three Houses, and part of the reason I enjoy it as much as I do is because of the depth that the world of Fodlan was given by Intelligent Systems in the original game. The original Fire Emblem Three Houses was not by any means perfect in its exploration of that world. There were many questions left unanswered, there were characters who didn't see their potential fulfilled, but that happened to Three Houses because the game was so ambitious in its scope. Fast forward to Three Hopes, and Intelligent Systems finally has the time to explore Fodlan in the depth that I think it deserves. I picked up the Golden Wildfire route because I wanted to see more of Claude Von Regan, I wanted to understand more of what made him tick, and that's exactly what I got. I got a far more detailed and nuanced version of Claude than what we saw in Three Houses. The result is a payoff that I thought was absolutely unbelievable, with a complete change in my understanding of that character. I didn't expect this from a hack and slash game. I didn't think they would go all out, but they did. That being said, at the end of my first 90-hour playthrough, I was probably worn thin on the concept, and completing every route looks like it's going to be around 200 hours, so for now, I'm going to leave it and say that you should check it out if you did enjoy Fire Emblem Three Houses. Even if you're not into the hack and slash genre, there's still a lot for people who enjoyed the series to get out of this game. Number 3. Bayonetta 3 Platinum Games 2022. Oh, I had so much fun playing this game. Bayonetta 3 was everything I wanted for this franchise and more. It is a superlative action game, where every moment I was thinking about what I had to do next, where every single second I had something to react to and something new to learn about what the enemies were going to do. Every stage gave Bayonetta sick new power to play with, and I had great fun using all the weapons and gigantic demons that she had at her command. The spectacle on display in this game is unmatched by any other game that I've seen. You can tell from the off the developers had an amazing time making this game. There are so many jokes that I think land incredibly well. There are so many outrageous scenes that I had so much fun watching. And the ending left me with the biggest grin on my face. The final boss fight in particular is completely unforgettable. The addition of Viola gives you a different type of gameplay to learn, and whilst it might not be as smooth as Bayonetta, I think that's kind of the point, with the game going to lengths to show you that she's just not quite there yet. And I haven't even mentioned the weird stealth sections, the mad demon chases, and that one point where you end up playing DDR for some reason. You can probably hear it in my tone of voice. Bayonetta 3 was a complete delight, and if it seems like your cup of tea, I'd recommend you give it a look. Number 2. Triangle Strategy, Square Enix, 2022. The battle for number 1 this year was incredibly intense, to the point that I'm not sure that this is the right place to put Triangle Strategy. It's perhaps unsurprising that the game that spawned one of my first videos to go above 5,000 views is one that I really enjoyed. But Triangle Strategy is so much more than that one weird lightning trick I found in the game. Triangle Strategy has a supreme confidence about it. It knows exactly what it wants to do, and it is unafraid to do it. It knows that it needs to create an early game that is slow, that doesn't have that much combat, because it believes fundamentally that this is required to set up Norzelia, to make you understand the world, the characters, and their motivations. It does so because it knows that the payoff later on is going to be worth it, and it knows that establishing these characters is incredibly important, because none of them are ever going to act illogically or in a way that the player can't understand. I was blown away by the choices that the game proposed to me, because unlike many other games, they weren't clear, they weren't obvious, and they had genuine merits to both sides that I had to consider. I was equally impressed when that firm understanding of the setting that the game had forced upon me meant that I was able to pick out the golden route immediately, not because I was trying to do so, but because the best possible decisions in front of me were the ones that the game established were likely to be the best possible decisions. I've gone a long way without talking about the gameplay, but suffice to say that this is a masterclass in strategy RPG combat. You are given a cast of 30 party members, and not one feels superfluous, despite the fact that they all have differing abilities. You have incredibly diverse maps, which mean that no one strategy is always going to be the best. It makes you truly feel like you're in command, because the strategy that you have will change based on the terrain and the characters that you have available to you. So many maps were solved for me by just an aha moment where I identified one character would be incredibly valuable, but the game is also incredibly happy to let you explore the depths of its system and just figure out a way to break it. And ultimately, yeah, I got to a point where I was able to smash it over my knee, but by then I had explored so much of the game that it felt more like a reward for finally figuring out something the developers didn't think of. You can add little details to that, like a soundtrack that I genuinely love with one of the best songs of the year, and a set of ending choices that I think really fostered some genuine and good-hearted debate about what is the best thing for the characters and for the world. And you get a game that I think is surpassingly good. So much so that small flaws like weak voice acting at the start, or a slow start to begin with in general, just fall by the wayside in the wake of something that I think is truly special. This was definitely the best game that released for me in 2022, but there is one more game on this list. Number 1. Mega Man Rock'n'Roll, Dennis Engelhard, 2019. 2022 is characterized to me by the release of Elden Ring preventing any other games from coming out for about 2 months, and then subsequently my own playthrough of Bloodborne burning me out so badly on video games that I just didn't want to play anything anymore. I am so lucky that I was recommended Mega Man Rock'n'Roll. It's not just an amazing game, it pretty much single-handedly revived my love of gaming from one of the most awful pieces of burnout that I think I'd ever had. Mega Man Rock'n'Roll is a freely distributed Mega Man fan game made by a single developer. It calls back to the likes of Mega Man 9 and Mega Man 2 in particular, but introduces Roll as a new character to Mega Man's world. Roll is an amazing breath of fresh air to the Mega Man formula, and her implementation here is perfect. It creates a real difference in gameplay between Mega Man and Roll, and whilst Roll ends up probably being more powerful than her brother, I think that's probably deserved given how she's been treated through the series. What Engelhard does with this game is beyond belief. The movement feels as good as, if not better, than anything Capcom has presented in the original Mega Man series. It feels almost as good as moving in Mega Man X does, and that's not the point of this game at all. It's just difficult enough for a Mega Man veteran such as myself. Very little in the game was a walkover, very little in the game felt unfair. It treads that line to near perfection, with very, very difficult stages followed up by much, much easier ones to help you cool down. And the stages themselves are worth mentioning. All of them utilize the idea of creating gimmicks that you're meant to learn that get more and more difficult as the stage goes on, and as you get better and better, these challenges become more and more surmountable. But I think the way that Dennis combines these in the Wily stages is where the game proves to be at its absolute best. In particular, Roll's second Wily stage is probably the best stage ever made in the Mega Man franchise. And having thought about it more, I think that this is the best game in the Mega Man franchise. I think it's better than 9. I think it's better than X. I think it's probably better than Mega Man 2. And for all of that to come from a single developer is a mark not just of incredible talent, but incredible love for Mega Man overall. To say I liked this game would be an understatement. Hell, to say that I loved this game would be an understatement as well. It is free. If you want to play a game right now, go and pick up Mega Man Rock'n'Roll. You will not be disappointed. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is my best game of the year for 2022. Thank you all very, very much for watching and supporting this channel for the past year. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. We do Let's Play content through the entire year, and I do some cheeky streams and additional videos as well. But for now, thank you, and have a very happy new year.